Hello, so how are we doing today on this beautiful Sunday? My name is Judith Mendoza and I am a behavior consultant and educator. And today on Sunday, I want to participate in autism awareness, education, and mentoring. So I am volunteering my time to provide education relating to communication for those who are adults in the autism spectrum disorder. And so the last 2 weeks I have been considering the matter regarding autism, going through analyzing yourself and answering the question, do I have autism? And then last week I provided a test, a self-test, where you can go and identify if you have autism. And so usually these classes that I do, I require that those participating do have their deficiencies taken care of. And the reason why I do that is because it is difficult to learn when we have deficiencies in our body. So nutrition is very important, and it is something that is very easy. I mean, with the intake of vitamins B12, B complex, and vitamin D3, it is important that you do take these. And for those who are interested in the course that I offer, I have different ones that have to do with education. These ones, I have a course for adult and children for social communication skills that will be learning the skills, and there is also another one in ethics. And then I also have a class, physical activity and nutrition care, and that will be guidance so that you can understand what is nutrition, why it's important, and how it affects your learning. And then also, of course, I offer a language learning, and this is Aprenda Inglés Fácil for those who want to learn English. And so I have posted the test last week for those who want to find out if they have autism, right? Because that is important. And even though if you want to take the classes that have to do with skills, that have to do with nutrition, this is something that I offer even though you may not be having autism. So that is no problem. My website is at insightfulinfo.square.site. And the classes, of course, due to COVID-19 are online only. And so I do require labs for those who want to take the course. As I mentioned, your learning, if you have autism, it is best that if you do have a primary care physician attending you, if you have are taking certain medications, and that you know that if there are deficiencies, for example, as I mentioned, checking the active vitamin B12 is important. Also checking your vitamin D3. But depending on how your nutrition is, what you eat, what you're eating every day, that will tell you also if you are deficient. And then there are other symptoms that you can check. This is important. I do coordinate these classes when it has to do with those in the autism spectrum or with those in the attention deficit disorders. I do coordinate with the primary care in order to know that you're not deficient from these vitamins. As I mentioned, especially vitamin D3 and active vitamin B12 in your body. Being deficient will affect your learning, the keeping of information, the understanding of information, the discerning of information, and the application of information, which is all of it is important. So with that being said, if you do have autism and you are an adult and you are having and have been having difficulties with understanding others and having interactions with others and being understood, this is something that is common in those who have autism, right? This is something that it happens when you have autism. And basically, autism can be a set of, or a combination of, or a spectrum of different conditions and illnesses. And so this is why when I do the courses, I require that those who take the course with me do present to me the results from their labs, from their doctor, so that to make sure that this is something that you have, that you're making sure that you're not deficient of. Because as I say, it has to do with your learning. It has to do with how your brain is going to function as you are taking the information. So if you know that you have autism, that is the first thing. The next thing is that if you do not have a primary care physician, then that, of course, this class is something that I am doing for the benefit of everyone who's watching these sessions that I have. And I am doing it as charity work, volunteering my time, volunteering my information in research that I have done, so that there can be a broader understanding of what autism is in adults. We know how it is in children, but once they reach to adulthood, there have been some inconsistencies in regards to what autism is, and in regards to labeling information also. Because at one point it was believed, and I know that now it is not what it is being observed. And I have been observing that as the information that I have brought up have opened up more information in regards to autism, and maybe observing the individuals from a different perspective. And most likely you are observing the same thing that I have been observing. And for example, we have before some 2 years ago, you can say, it was believed that the person with autism had different type of levels of learning, and then they are regressing, or it seemed that they're losing skills that they have learned. But what happens is that if the person loses these patterns of identity that they use in order for them to function, because those in the autism spectrum disorder do function based on patterns. So if they lose these patterns, because what I have found out is that instead of doing as we do, those who of us who don't have autism, so instead of us learning skills in order for us to do the skill and apply it to self, and then it becomes something that we know, those in the autism spectrum disorder are not doing that. What they are doing, or what they do, is that they copy exactly as if they are as if they were tracing. When you trace a drawing and you trace exactly what you see underneath the sheet. And so those in the autism spectrum disorder have been doing that, have been replicating exactly what they see in others, including the whole person. So if it is a female person that they are replicating, they will replicate the whole individual, including the skills of the individual. So if it is a male, he will be under the impression at the time that he is taking a female form, instead of just doing the skills that they are visualizing. So this is done as long as they are seeing this pattern, and they memorize also these patterns, especially if it happens in the family and it's years after years after years after years of seeing the same patterns and copying the same patterns. So just as those in the dissociative identity disorders, that they also use identity patterns or alternates to their identity, so they function under other identities, and then they have primary identities, and then they have secondary, and so forth, and they can have multiple identities in order for them to function. Now, those in the autism spectrum disorder tend to do this also. So if you are an adult, right, I have been working with Frank in this matter, and right now we are at the point where he's going through the process of developing his own identity. This is something that happens naturally for those who are non-autistic. And so this is something also to to take notice of, right? Because those in the autism spectrum disorder are not developing this automatic identity of self as it happens for those who are non-autistic. Okay, so these things are good to know. If you have autism, know that there are others, and I'm sure you know, that are going through this same situation. Basically, it has to do with understanding, discerning and understanding information. The way that we do this is by acquiring the skills of listening. And then, of course, there are other things that are related to communication. So it is not just that communication is that you speak and you are communicating. It is not that alone. There is a process that has to happen in order for us to be able to communicate thoughts from one individual to another individual. So if you're an adult, there is never too late. It is never too late to learn how to do these things. Now, think about this matter, right? Think about this matter. What if you were an adult who, instead of having autism, has hearing and speech difficulties? So you're deaf, you're hearing impaired. What will be the most appropriate thing to do then? Because when you think about it, this is what makes the difference. The answer to that question is what makes the difference in between one saying to oneself, you know, I need to learn this skill in order for me to communicate. Because those in the autism spectrum disorder know that they are having difficulties, and they know that if you have autism, you know that you're understanding information. The thing is that you are not able to develop these characteristics that will make communication happen for you, as you see in other humans, in other children. Because if you're an adult who has autism, most likely, I am sure that you have noticed that this happens in those who don't have autism. So will the answer be to say, well, let me just make it look like I can communicate, and then find yourself being going through a lot of difficulties because of it, being misunderstood, developing relationships that are difficult for you to maintain because others are not understanding you. And so the difference is, for those who are impaired in hearing or in their speech, is that they'll readily say, well, you know, there is sign language. So it is not difficult for them or for parents, when the situation is like visible, for them to discern what is best to do for their child. So this is why I mentioned in regards to the importance of knowing if you have autism, and to know what autism is. People are born, humans are born with autism, with attention deficit disorder, with Down syndrome, and with any other brain disorders. It isn't that one day you wake up and you have autism. And some things can make it more difficult for you. As I mentioned, nutrition. Vitamins are essential if you are not having the proper food. But even if you were having the proper food, you may be also lacking, being deficient. And so it is part of self-care. It is part of you're saying, I am important, I need to understand how my body functions, and I need to know what I can do to make myself function better, to have optimum function. So if you have difficulty, I know those in the autism spectrum disorder do have difficulty with eating certain foods. I know Frank does, and he used to be what is known a picky eater, eating only certain things. There were things that he wouldn't eat. He will try it because he wanted to assimilate to the certain identities that he was impersonating, and so he wanted to do it fully, including eating certain foods in a certain way. And he will try it just for one instance, but it is something that he wasn't doing all the time. So if you know, then my advice is that if you are not taking any medications, usually vitamin B12 and vitamin D3 is something that you can take because the body does not produce it. If you have to be in the sun in at a certain time, and the sun have to hit your body, have to shine over your body in a certain area for you to be having the vitamin D3, which is very essential for function of our cells, including our brain activity, and also vitamin B12, which is responsible for our DNA and chromosomes. And our DNA is not something that cannot be corrected. It can be corrected, but if you're not taking the nutrition that you're supposed to be taking, it's not going to happen. Also, whatever connections that we're supposed to be making as we're learning, we're processing information, and as we process information, the more that we think about situations, the more conscious that we become, and we're discerning information, we're understanding information, and we're making application of the information we're trying. Then all of these is our brain being put to function. In turn, it makes new connections. Our neurons work better, and whatever else that makes up our brain also have better function, which is very important when you're learning. And yes, our brain can become better, but it's not going to be from one day to another. Vitamins and amino acids and all of these things that we need, that are nutrition, are not going to have a function from one day to another. It's going to take months and sometimes even years for our body to repair, especially when it comes to the brain. So knowing that, it's very important. Also, when it comes to, as you practice, as you're gaining better discernment and understanding of how things are, then you're going to gain confidence in yourself, which is very important also when it comes to communication. And that is something that I will be speaking about next time. Now, when it comes to communication, we have to be able to start practicing speaking from the point of I know some in the autism spectrum disorder have difficulty attaching themselves to their own identity. And it is because, of course, this is a way that if you have autism and you have learned to maneuver in the world using identities of others, then most likely you'll feel uncomfortable with being you, being who you are, who you're supposed to be. As I say, for those in the autism spectrum disorder, this is something that has to be done manually. That one has to put effort into making this to happen. For those who are not in the autism spectrum disorder, you will see that the individual, a child, a baby, you start calling the baby by his or her name, and that is a brain function that makes the baby respond to his or her name. It's automatic. It happens in the brain. As the brain makes the connection, the brain is able to receive, perceive that information. It's heard, right? Because you can have the baby's not looking at you, but the baby hears the name, and he or she turns around because that baby is conscious that that name is his or her name, is attached to him or her. So the response in the brain, as the baby perceives the information through hearing, that baby responds. So when that is missing, we call that autism. And again, autism spectrum disorder is a combination of other conditions also that can happen, and this is due to nutrition. So if you leave the matter that way, because that baby is already deficient in nutrition, that baby is born malnutrition. It is the reason why the baby's formation, which starts in the brain, did not make the necessary connections that it needed to make inside the brain. When you look at different images of the brain between those who don't have autism and those who have autism, and you see the brain structure, you will see differences in the brain, including in the mass of the cushiony part, white part of the brain. And so all of this is what autism is. And so if you do have autism, then you will know that you will find yourself having these difficulties. But the best thing to do is not to say, well, you know, let me pretend that I can do this, or pretend that I can do that. Even if you are very good at imitating what others do, imitating them to the point that you can transition from identity to identity without too much notice. You can do that, but you will have a lot of difficulties with others, because you will be replicating different identities, different personalities, and so you will look conflicted. You will look as if you're unsure of yourself, or incompetent. You will look as if you're a fake, you're a liar. And so, of course, these are things that when you have relationships with others, it doesn't bring good relationships. It can make a relationship very difficult. And so, most likely, if you want a relationship with someone, even if it's a friendship, it can be conflicted, because you haven't learned how to control your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own emotions. You're replicating the emotions of others that could be conflicted, problematic, looking for altercations. You're not in control of yourself to say, well, you know, I am going to behave in this way, or I am going to behave in that other way. Or when it comes to whatever you're going to say to others, if you're just repeating what someone else has said, and you're repeating that, but the words that you're using are not appropriate, or the words that you're using are making you look like you're cruel, or that you want to do bad to others. So communication is, when you're communicating, of course, you're doing this communication with someone else also. You're obviously, we wouldn't have a problem, or you wouldn't have a problem, if you will be by yourself and you didn't have to communicate with someone else. But the situation is not that. So we have to realize that first, that the situation is that we do have to have interaction with other humans. Either that is our family members, our friends, our co-workers, our schoolmates. We will have to have communication with other humans. So then you know that you have autism, Okay, that is that is that is part of who you are, right? So each one of us have different things and circumstances that make us who we are, part of who we are. So it can make us deficient in some areas, limited in some areas. So we have to then realize, and as I mentioned before, if you were having difficulties with hearing, that you couldn't hear and you couldn't speak, most likely you will be interested, and most likely if you're an adult will end having these difficulties, and your handicap was that you couldn't hear and you have problems with your speech, that the logical thing will be to learn how to use sign language in order to communicate, because the goal is these things exist, all these things exist because we want humans to be able to learn how to communicate for and by themselves. Obviously, if not, then this tool of sign language, this language wouldn't exist. But the goal is for myself, for yourself, for oneself to learn how to communicate from my own viewpoint, to learn how to process information in our brain, meaning that the way that you start with that is you visualize the information and you hear the information. So what is the best way for you to learn? That is one thing that you must find out. What is the best way for you to learn? Is it better if you learn through images? And then when it comes to using information in regards to learning how to put words together, what methods have you used? There are specialists that dedicate themselves to help others to use their speech, right? And so these are some things that we could consider. Having a speech therapist for adults. So what will make the difference in between getting help from others, getting professional help, will be that one admits to oneself, I have difficulty, I have limitations, I have autism, and autism makes my learning different. Autism makes my way of communication in a way that I can't communicate the way that I want to, right? Because it is not that that the human with autism doesn't know that they have difficulties and problems. The thing is that because you can speak, you can utter words, it can give one the impression, well, I can handle it by doing this and this and that. But at the same time, you're missing information because you're concentrating in doing one thing, and in multitasking is something that we shouldn't be doing because it is not healthy for our brain. So when it comes to whatever you're doing, when you're communicating with others, by replicating the identities of others and what others are saying, then how is it for you? Because I know that for some, if your situation changes, as it happened with Frank, his situation changed, and his family situation changed, so his situation changed, and now he finds himself with his family growing older, and his siblings growing older, and going through the stages of life that one transitions, you become an adult, and then your siblings, they start getting married, and so they leave home, and maybe a situation can happen with the parents. So these patterns that you had, or in Frank's situation that he had, they started diminishing. And so now, what is there to do? They're not there for you to visualize them. So then it seemed that he was losing skills of communication. But it wasn't that. It was that because he had to replicate exactly what he's seeing, those identities are not there anymore. He sees them seldomly. He hears about them, and whenever he get together with his brothers, then maybe he can replicate that, but it is not the same as when they were home, when everybody was home. Mom was home, dad was home, siblings were home, so he can go from one to the other without any problem, and it didn't seem as if he had any kind of condition, any kind of difficulty. And for some reason, and the reason is actually because he was using these identities, so for some reason it seemed that his understanding, his discernment and understanding only functioned when he was doing the imitating of these identities, because he could reason. I could talk to him. I could talk to him. I could talk to Frank, and I could have conversations with him, but there were times where we will just go into arguments, because he will jump from one thing that is reasonable to another that is not. And that was when he used the appropriate wording, the appropriate words to maybe give me his opinion in regards to, what we were talking about. But then, because the way that he was doing this is that he's pretending that the conversation is happening between, maybe most likely, the base identities that he used, which were mom and dad. So when he used to have conversations with me, in his mind, this conversation is happening between mom and dad. So it's like he's visualizing mom and dad, and he's answering according to what they will answer. And of course, the same problems that mom and dad were having, he was reenacting. He was making it happen on me because he's reflecting these things on me. And so the same, most likely the same way how his mother and dad will have a conversation that will end up in an argument, that is the same way that our conversations were. So we were constantly having disagreements, and sometimes it even sounded as if he was on someone else's side and not like he was against what I was saying. And of course, if you're having a conversation with someone and someone is telling you something like this, you will find it a lot of difficult to maintain your peace and happiness. And so in the things that are important, right, is to recognize that autism, it's going to cause limitations for you. That the things that are automatic for others are not going to be for you. So this means that you have to learn how to capture information, how to process information, and also that developing of an identity is something that happens naturally, almost automatically, in those who do not have autism. The way that we capture information, we perceive information, is different than yours if you have autism or if your child has autism. Capturing information only in a literal way, or as you see it, means that you have to put the extra effort in learning the listening skills. And so that is what I will be speaking in regards to next week. And of course, this, after I go through all of these necessary things that are necessary, and today it is based on having the correct mentality in regards to autism. You have limitations. You know what your limitations are. Nutrition, malnutrition will make it more of a difficult time for you to understand information. And so having taking your vitamin B12 of at least 100 micrograms per day will help, or you can have this under the direction of your physician. For the vitamin D3, the 50 micromilligrams or 2000 international units per day is good every day. This is something that our body needs, just as how we need water to hydrate every day and to exercise and to have good sleep. All of these will contribute to how your brain will function and how you are going to be able to capture information, to process information, to discern information, to understand information, and then to make application of it. Otherwise, you will not. And what happens with that is that as we age, as we get older, we don't get better, we get worse. So we need this type of nutrition, including, of course, having good eating habits. I know that those with autism may have nutritional problems when it comes to eating, especially if you're not being treated for autism. But making a routine. And why? Because you're important, because your life is valuable, because you exist and you are important and you matter. And that is what you have to tell yourself. So today it is a general informational in regards to what is needed in order for you to develop communication, right? So we need our brain to be healthy, to be functioning to the optimum that it can function. So taking care of those deficiencies, especially as I mentioned, the vitamin B12 and the vitamin D3, you can start with those, or you can take a multivitamin that contains vitamin B12 and vitamin D3. So taking that every day, making sure that you're sleeping good also, at least 7 hours per day, per night. And then, because there's a lot to learn when it comes to communication, if you're an adult, you have grown up with a lot of difficulty in communication, going through communication, and so there, in everything that you have to do in order for you to communicate, it's something that for you, it didn't happen naturally, it didn't happen automatically. So this is something that you have to put forth the effort. So there's a lot that has to do with communication. So our identity, who is I, me, the person of I, is important, is what is needed. So that have to be developed first, right? And then we have to develop what other things that are included, for example, what the personality is, developing a personality, developing values, because an identity is like you have a basket and you're putting your skills, your talents, your personality, your knowledge, your information, your values, your likes, your dislikes, your everything, your ideas, your opinions, everything is put into this one person. So for me, when it comes to Judith, you can see the type of person that I am by what I speak about, by how I carry myself. You can see the type of personality that I have by the way that I behave. And the reason why I have done this, also, I have my profile on LinkedIn, I have my profile on Facebook, I have my profile on Twitter, I have my profile on Pinterest, I have my own websites, I have a profile on Anchor.fm, I have a profile on YouTube. and you will see consistency there. What changes is what changes. It can change. I can change what I do. I can alter that. I can change that. I can change from, and I had that the position that I have for myself, that I was a public speaker, because I was going to do that. And even though the internet, yes, it is a public space, I decided to concentrate on only certain things, and those things you will see them posted on my profile. So what is the emphasis in there, in my profile? What do you see? What is more important? I have also a personal profile where I put the music that I like, or the hairstyles that I like, or some other things. Music, it could be music too. I like to sing, I like to do all these things. So all of it, right, including my secular life, including my spiritual life, all of it, all of the things that I do with my body stem from one point, and that is from Judith. There is a foundation, and the foundation is Judith. So Judith can be a spiritual person. Judith is a spiritual person. Judith is a behavior consultant. Judith has the skills of different things. I can list them all, but they are all things that I know how to do. So when I think of these, right, I think in my mind, I think of me doing these things. So I'm conscious of myself. Conscious of who I am and what I can do. Now, the thing about speaking out words and putting words together, it's going to take effort. Because if you're going to speak from your point of view, then you have to start from as if you were a baby. It's going to take effort. And also, this is something that I will be speaking about. So identity, the skills of listening and how it relates to identity, values, how it relates to identity, personality, character, skills, talents, responsibilities, and how it relates to identity, right? And then how to put words together. One thing you can do, right, an exercise that you can do that I try, and also I will be explaining transitioning, what transitioning means. And then also, of course, I will be speaking about matters when it comes to gender, and how or what place gender should have in the identity of a person. Because we're not walking penises, we're not walking vaginas, we're humans first, right? I have been saying this on Twitter because for the longest, and on Facebook and on LinkedIn, because it matters how we view ourselves. And we're humans first. My gender shouldn't matter. I am a human. My gender should matter only when it has to do that I am with my husband and we are intimately involved, or we want to have children. So it is a personal matter. So that I will also speak as time comes for that. So for today, you know that autism causes the person to become a literal thinker. So the matter of how the autistic individual, or the one who has autism, either a child or an adult, process information, the processing information is crucial. And so know that you learn differently. And so I will be posting an article that I wrote in regards to the I have named it, I have called it Thinking, Learning, and Communication Processes Types in Autistic Individuals. So I will be posting that to this recording. And then some of the things that you can start doing, because next week I will be and everything will be identity and everything else that relate to building this identity for oneself, right? Because if your hands are doing the things, if your mouth is speaking it, then it is you, the person who's saying it and speaking it and doing these things, the person who's doing it. So if you're using patterns of identity and that is causing you to have moments of unconsciousness, and then dealing with the situation saying I, but really you're not referring to yourself, you're referring to someone else who spoke that whatever you're repeating, then know that when you say the word I, it refers to yourself, to me, to myself. It refers to the person who's speaking it. Because we do not put the person's voice and whatever that person is saying onto another person. That is not what we do. So you have to understand this. If you are an adult who has autism, you have to understand this, because this is what causes difficulties and problems in the relationships. So it isn't, right? It isn't that you're being discriminated in some way. Again, the person with autism, you can't tell in any part of that person's body that that person has autism, and you cannot expect that someone, just by looking at you, they're going to know that you have autism and understand that they must do something in regards to the situation in order to make it better for you. So the only thing that could tell is for you to say to that person, look, I have autism and I have difficulty understanding what you said. Please explain this to me plainly, and ask questions. If you do not understand, ask questions. If the matter was more simpler, as I mentioned, if your problem was that you are having a difficult time hearing, that you cannot hear, and you have problem with your speech, the matter will be that you learn sign language and you learn how to speak. Which in high school, I had to learn sign language to communicate with others who were deaf. And so I did communicate, and what I learned from the deaf community and from the language of sign language is that you only need a few words in order to say what you want to say. And so maybe applying that format as you begin to practice how to communicate will be something useful. Not trying to look non-autistic, but knowing that you have limitations and that your understanding is difficult. So if you say to someone, look, I have autism, don't be ashamed of yourself and having limitations. We all have limitations, you have to know that. So that is another thing that I will go through in regards to self-confidence, as I mentioned. And so self-confidence have to do with of course how much we know and how we handle matters, and also it has to do with other personal things. But having the correct mentality is that it doesn't matter who the human is that you're talking to. That person is a human. That human is a human. So seeing the individual in that way, that human is a human. It doesn't matter how much money he has, how much education that human has, or how important that human believes to be in the world. He or she is a human with imperfections, with limitations, just as you have them, just that they are different. So viewing people from that point of view, don't self-hate. We tend to do that sometimes, you know, when we come to, we feel, okay, you know what, I try and then I fail and I fail and I fail, and you feel like a failure, and no, don't, you're trying. That's all we can do. We can try. So don't be negative in regards to yourself. Put positive thoughts around your room, your home. Look for positive quotes. And when you talk to others, don't put yourself down. Love yourself for who you are. And so when it comes to listening, right, you can start by doing this, and I will be speaking about that next week, next Sunday. I might speak about it in regards to self-esteem on Saturday, and then speak about the listening skill, acquiring the listening skills in order to communicate on Sunday. So what you can do is to practice, right? So if you're doing scripts, know that doing scripts is good, but you have to do it from your point of view. So you can start with making small conversation. A conversation starts with, how are you doing? What are you doing? Depending on who it is that you're talking to, of course, because if you're talking to a friend, you can be more personal, but if you're talking to your boss, you can be like, you know, what are you doing? So we have to see the difference, and this you will be learning. So not knowing is okay. Not doing something about the situation is not okay. So little by little, you will be putting together all the things in order for you to be able to communicate from your own self. So when it comes to the listening, right? If you're doing the scripts, something you can do is you can do a script, start a conversation, but then you have to listen to the person, because everyone has something to say. Everyone have different opinions. Everyone have different likes and dislikes. So if you are engaging in communication with someone and you say to that person as an opener of that conversation, or to start a conversation, you go and you say, how are you doing, which is an opening of the conversation that can happen between two humans, and it can even be your friend. You can start with your friends, you can start with your family members. Then you're asking the person a well-being question. You're asking that person, your question implies that you're interested in the well-being of the human. So then you have to wait for an answer. That person says, you know, I am doing okay today. Not as good as I would like to, but you know, it's okay. I'm handling the matter. From there, you can say, well, you know, I hope that this, whatever the situation is, it changes. Or you can ask another question so that you can show more interest into what that human is going through, and say, well, why don't you, you know, tell me about it? What's going on? Then you have to continue listening. So how to develop this listening skill? Well, what are people saying? How to understand this? Well, you can listen. When you listen, you can listen to conversations and make the effort to understand what's going on. What is going on between these two people who are talking to one another? It could be the conversation that's going on from something that's going on in the world that have to do with matters that matter in the world. And so listening has to do with showing interest in others, genuine interest, even if it's not something that you're interested in, because the matter is also about others, not about just myself. So it might be something that I find it boring, but I am interested in the other person. So I listen to what the person is saying. Listening is the key to processing the information, but also being interested in what is being said. If you're not interested and you think that you know the answer before they tell you, and they don't even have to speak to you, then maybe then you don't want interactions with others. Okay, so that is what I had for today. So having the correct mentality matters in regards to autism. Having the correct mentality in your self-care, nutrition, the food that you're eating, hydrating, exercising, sleeping habits, and also making sure that you are taking the vitamin B12 every day. Consult your physician if you're taking any medications, or if you want to have your labs, You should do then the active B12 to know if you're deficit in it, but most likely you are. All humans are, because we do not produce vitamin B12, and so the majority of people are malnutritioned, lacking this, and also lacking vitamin D3, which will make our situation even worse, not only because of our brain function, but we will feel just miserable, depressed, feeling even worse than the situation should be. All right, so I thank you for joining me today, and so next Saturday I said that I will be doing the topic in regards to self-esteem, building self-esteem, what is self-esteem, understanding self-esteem. And then on Sunday I will be speaking about learning the skill of listening, which it has to do with also becoming interested, genuinely interested in others. All right, so I thank you for joining me today, and I hope you continue to have a beautiful Sunday.